Hey friends, tonight we're going somewhere tight and dark and full of smells you'll wish you couldn't smell. We're heading behind the stone walls of a medieval fortress. Not to fight heroically from the battlements, but to wait. To wait and suffer and try to stay alive just one more day. We're going inside a siege. There won't be any gallant charges or clashing swords tonight. Only stale air, sour bread, dripping ceilings, and a creeping hunger that starts in your belly and ends in your bones. Maybe you'll be a farmer, clutching your children in a crowded chapel, listening for the sound of battering rams. Maybe you'll be a watchman with bloodshot eyes and cracked lips, trying not to blink too long in case the next moment is your last. But before we step through those gates and lock ourselves inside, take a moment. If you like these slow, quiet journeys through the more miserable corners of the past, please do like the video and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what time is it where you are? Who else is wrapped up in a blanket right now, gently drifting off to the sound of old stone and old suffering? Alright, take a breath. Let your muscles relax, because tonight we're going somewhere with no food, no fresh water, and plenty of diseases. You're going to wake up inside a medieval siege. Segment 1, Daily Life Immersion. Part 1, you're a peasant inside the walls. Imagine waking up on a stone floor. You don't know exactly what time it is, only that the sun hasn't reached the narrow slits in the wall yet. The room is already warm with the breath of too many people packed together. The air is thick, damp clothes, burnt wood, human sweat, and something else, something sour. You're sleeping in what used to be the chapel, or maybe the stables. It doesn't matter anymore. Every space inside the walls is now crammed with people, farmers, labourers, old women, crying infants, whole families who had just a few minutes' warning when the bells rang and the gates slammed shut. Your family was one of them. You came in with whatever you could carry, a sack of onions, a half-full water skin, a blanket that now serves as both mattress and cover. You're lucky, you're inside the walls, but it's only been a week, and already things are changing. The water is being rationed. The bucket from the well is guarded now. People whisper that the attackers might have poisoned it, or that someone dropped something foul down the shaft. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that your mouth is dry almost all the time now, and when you do get water, it tastes slightly of metal, slightly of dirt. The bread is changing too. At first it was bread. Now it's something in the shape of bread, made from flour that smells off, mixed with sawdust or mashed roots. If you're lucky, it's warm. If not, it's gummy and hard, sticking to your teeth like clay. Food is handled by the stewards. That means waiting in line. Always waiting. Everyone watches everyone else. A neighbour with a rounder face might become a target for angry stares. You learn not to chew too loudly. You learn not to hoard. At night, the noises are the worst. Coughing, arguing, someone vomiting, someone crying softly. You can't tell if it's a child or an old man. Somewhere a baby cries, over and over again, until it just stops. You don't ask questions. Lice are part of life now. You scratch and try not to look at the red welts on your arms. Clothes aren't changed often. Washing happens in the corners, with rags dipped in cold water. The smell clings to everything. When you walk the narrow alleyways between the inner walls, you sometimes pass people you used to know. A butcher, a brewer, a girl who used to sell apples. They look different now, shrunken somehow. Eyes that dart, lips that stay closed. You avoid the courtyard when possible. The mood there shifts fast. A rumour starts and spreads. An enemy tunnel, a traitor court, a secret exit in the well. None of it is true, but hope, when it flickers, can turn to panic just as easily. On better days, someone plays music. A flute, a drum, a voice lifted in song, cracked but brave. It doesn't last long, but for a few minutes you remember something better. There's still prayer, always prayer. The chapel, once silent, now echoes with whispered chants. People kneel where they can. Crosses are clutched tighter. It's not so much faith as desperation. Words repeated because there's nothing else to do. And outside, always the drums, always the distant horns. Sometimes a stone thuds against the outer wall. Sometimes it's something worse. You've seen the birds circling above the killing fields beyond the walls. You try not to imagine what they're feasting on. Some say help is coming. Some say they've heard footsteps at night near the gate. Spies, saboteurs, miracles. But in here, inside these walls, time has slowed. Days blur, nights stretch, and hunger becomes your closest companion. You don't think about next week. You think about the next ration, the next drop of clean water, the next time you'll be allowed to see the sun without risking an arrow to the face. And you wait, and you wait, and you wait. The days take on a strange rhythm. Not the rhythm of farm work or market bells or church services. That life, the life you knew before, is gone. Now your hours are marked by the rattle of chains on the gates, the clang of armour, and the slow toll of the warning bell each time something stirs beyond the wall. There's a smell in the fortress now. It clings to your clothes, your hair, the backs of your hands. It's not just the sweat and smoke. It's something more. The scent of too many people in too small a space, of food that is no longer fresh, of sickness that hangs in the air like a fog. You learn to step carefully in the alleys and corners of the fortress. Chamber pots are emptied out of necessity, sometimes over the edge of a wall, sometimes into overflowing barrels. Waste piles up faster than it can be cleared. The ground itself feels unclean. Children adapt quickly. That's the strange part. You see them playing with pebbles, inventing little games with sticks or bones. They giggle. But it's a thin kind of laughter, worn around the edges. Behind them, mothers and grandmothers speak in hushed tones. Fathers stare silently at the sky. Rumours drift like smoke. Someone heard that the attackers are building a tower, that it's already taller than the outer wall, that they've cut off the stream that feeds the well, that they've sent messengers demanding surrender. But surrender means opening the gates, and nobody knows what lies on the other side. Some say it's quick, others say it's slow. No one agrees. You try to pass the time, but there is very little to do. Reading is rare. Most cannot read. Instead, people talk. Softly. Always softly. Old stories are told again. Stories of saints, of knights, of long-dead kings who escaped death through cleverness or prayer. Stories that feel less like history and more like superstition now. There are lists, ration lists, guard lists, latrine duties. You hope your name doesn't come up too often. Some people volunteer to help the castle staff, sweeping floors, distributing food, helping with the wounded when someone comes in from the wall. But every task feels fragile. Every step outside the inner chambers feels risky. The pigeons are gone. They were eaten the second week. The dogs vanished soon after. Now, you see fewer and fewer birds in the sky. You think about the harvest, about your small plot of land. You wonder if it's been trampled, or burned, or taken. You wonder if it matters. You wonder if you'll ever see it again. Night comes early now, even in summer. The light fades behind the thick stones and the fortress becomes a maze of flickering torches, low fires and whispering shadows. Sleep comes in fits, interrupted by creaking wood, groaning stone, the distant sounds of tools, enemy hands working under cover of dark. Sometimes you dream of water, not rain, not the brown trickle at the bottom of the barrel, but real water, a river, a well, a cup of clean cold water so clear you can see your reflection in it. Other times you dream of bread, of biting into something warm, something soft, but mostly you dream of nothing at all. You drift into blackness, only to be woken again by the shifting feet of someone next to you, or the cough that won't stop in the corner of the room. There are fewer people in the chapel now. You don't know where they've gone. Some may have been moved elsewhere. Some may have gone to help on the walls. Some may have died quietly in their sleep. You begin to mark time by the empty spaces. That man who always sat by the steps humming to himself. He's gone. The baby who cried. There's no more crying. The girl with the bright scarf. No one has seen her for days. And yet life continues. The stewards bring food. The priest leads whispered prayers. The guards shout orders. And somewhere far away, unseen, a king sits comfortably in a distant hall, sipping wine and waiting for news. But here, inside the siege, you are a name on a list. A pair of hands, a mouth to feed, a set of eyes growing duller with each passing morning. And you wait, because that's all there is to do. You wait, and you wonder, how many days are left? You wake before the sun, but not because someone called for you. It's instinct now. Your body has adjusted to the strange hours of siege life. Sleep is never deep, always shallow, always interrupted. A creak of wood, a cough in the dark, the snap of a bowstring. Everything wakes you. You rise slowly from your place in the barracks. It's little more than a bench and a shared cloak. The stone floor is cold, and the air smells of oil, iron, and the thick musk of unwashed bodies. You dress quickly. Padded tunic, leather belt, boots still damp from the previous day. You leave the helmet off for now. It's heavy, and your head still aches from wearing it yesterday. Your first duty is always the same. Head to the ramparts. You take the stairs 2 at a time, your legs protesting from fatigue, your hands brushing the cold stone wall to steady yourself. At the top, the world opens again. The rampart stretches out before you, and beyond that the grey landscape of war. It is strangely quiet this morning, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but expectant. Mist clings to the ground outside the walls. You can just make out the outlines of enemy tents, rows upon rows of them. Smoke from their cook fires drifts lazily upward. They're in no hurry. They know you're not going anywhere. You check in with the watch captain. He nods without speaking. There's no need for words. You take your post. Standing guard sounds simple until you do it for weeks. You must remain still, watchful, focused, not just for minutes, but for hours. Shifts blur together. The body aches. The eyes sting from staring into the sun. You scan the tree line, the siege machines, the towers being built. Taller each day. You know what's coming. Eventually they'll try to breach the walls, but for now it's the waiting. Below, inside the walls, life continues in cramped, dirty spaces. But up here, you're exposed. The wind cuts through your clothes. The rain, when it comes, has nowhere to go but down your back. Sometimes snow. Sometimes heat so intense the stone burns your hands if you rest them too long on the rampart. Food is carried up in small bundles. Hard bread, dried meat, sometimes beans. You eat with your back to the enemy lines, chewing slowly, swatting away the flies. You've learned not to be wasteful. Crumbs are precious. Water is gold. There is little conversation, not out of discipline, but fatigue. Everyone is tired. Everyone has said what there is to say. When a pigeon lands nearby, heads turn. You haven't seen one in days. It flies off again. No one speaks. Occasionally there are alerts. A flicker in the trees. A movement near the wall. A cry from the southern tower. You ready your bow, or your spear. You position the boiling oil. You check the rocks stacked at your feet, just in case. Sometimes the enemy tests your nerves. They approach just close enough to taunt. Banging drums, shouting insults, laughing. Sometimes they fling things, heads, waste dead animals. You do not react. You've learned that much. But the smell stays. And when the wind shifts, it seeps over the wall and into your clothes, into your skin. The worst are the nights. You take turns sleeping in shifts. An hour here, maybe 2 there. You curl up against the stone, your weapon clutched to your chest, trying not to dream of ladders rising in the dark. There's always the fear of tunnels. You listen for scraping, for strange vibrations. If they dig beneath the wall and set fire to the supports, the collapse will be sudden and deadly. Your fingers are blistered from the rope, the wood, the iron. Your shoulders ache from hours under armour. You no longer care how you smell. No one does. Hygiene is a memory. Bath, soap, clean cloth, all gone. Now you wipe your hands on your tunic and keep moving. Sometimes the commander walks the ramparts. His face is pale. He says little, but his presence matters. You nod as he passes, and wonder if even he believes you'll hold much longer. And yet, there are moments. The light just before sunrise, the strange calm of the wind at dusk, the sight of a falcon circling above, indifferent to the chaos below, and the stars, always the stars. On clear nights, you stare at them while on watch, your breath rising in soft clouds. They remind you of a time before this siege, of a home, of your childhood, of a life with fewer walls. But the moment always passes. A horn sounds in the dark, you grip your weapon tighter. Another long night begins, and still you wait. Days and nights blur together. There are no clocks, just the rhythm of the guard shifts, the position of the sun, and the echoing bell that marks emergencies. You've learned to judge time by the shadows on the wall, by the sound of boots on stone, by how dry your mouth feels when the water ration comes around again. The body stiffens from constant readiness. The rampart isn't wide, just enough space for two men to pass shoulder to shoulder, shields on their backs, weapons in hand. You walk it again and again, from one end of the tower to the next, then back, then again, always watching, always waiting. Your hands have changed, calloused, cracked, dirt under every fingernail. You can't remember the last time they felt warm or clean. You keep your armour nearby, even when you sleep, what little you wear now. The full plate was for battles, ceremonies, or wealthy knights. You wear padded cloth and leather, reinforced where it matters. Not glamorous, but enough to stop a stray arrow if you're lucky. The arrows come now and then. Some days they're constant, black darts raining from the sky. Other times they stop completely, and it's the silence that unnerves you more than the sound of metal. There are games soldiers play with each other, not real games, just the things you say to keep the mind from slipping. Guessing how many days of grain remain, counting the number of enemy tents that appear overnight, betting when the next messenger will arrive, or whether he'll bring news or just another empty promise. Occasionally you're pulled from the ramparts and sent on repair duty, fixing broken stairs, reinforcing doors, plugging cracks where water leaks into the stores. Manual labour is a welcome change. It warms the blood, keeps the mind focused, but it also reminds you how fragile the walls are. You see where the stone has shifted. You hear the creak of wood that was solid just weeks ago. You notice the pile of arrows growing thinner in the storage room, and you feel the unease growing in the corners of the garrison, unspoken but ever present. The chaplain makes his rounds. He speaks in a soft voice, always the same tone. Blessings, encouragement. You nod, as do the others. You don't need to believe. You just need to hear something human, even if it's just words. Discipline holds, for now. But you've noticed the change. Fewer salutes, less formality. The younger recruits look older now, and the older ones seem quieter than ever. When a companion dies, there's no ceremony, no funeral pyres or burial mounds. You carry him quietly to the cellars or whatever pit has been dug for the purpose. A name might be whispered, a token left behind, but mostly there's just silence. You try not to think about it. But sometimes, at night, as you sit on the tower steps with your back to the wind, you wonder, if the wall is breached, how long could you hold? Would you run? Would you fight to the end? Would you even know when to choose? And then your shift is over. You descend the stairs again, legs heavy, feet numb. You eat something, whatever has been handed to you. It barely registers as food anymore. Sometimes a bit of meat. Sometimes a strange paste made of beans, barley, and whatever else the cooks have scraped together. It doesn't matter. You eat because you must, and then you sleep, if your body allows it, and when the bell rings again, you rise and return to the wall. The ramparts are your world now, stone beneath your boots, sky above your head, and always, always that line of tents on the horizon. You cannot see their faces, but you know they're watching too, waiting, just like you. Let us leave the fortress walls behind for a moment. Let us step further back, further west, to a time when the siege had not yet begun, but the long grinding journey toward it was already well underway. The year is 1096, and across the kingdoms of Western Europe, something strange is stirring. At first it is just a whisper, passed from priest to noble, from market stall to monastery, a call to arms, a journey east, a war, but also a pilgrimage, a campaign, but also a promise of forgiveness. It begins with Pope Urban II. At a council in Clermont, he calls upon Christian knights to retake the Holy Land from Muslim control. He speaks of sacred duty, of honour, of eternal reward, but he also speaks of sin and of redemption. For many that promise is enough. Thousands begin to gather. Knights, yes, but also peasants, bakers, farmers, blacksmiths, whole families, entire villages. They sew crosses onto their tunics. They sell their belongings. They say farewell to their homes, some forever. And so begins the long march. From France, from the German states, from Italy and beyond. They cross rivers, mountains. They pass through unfamiliar lands. Some die of disease. Some are attacked by bandits. Others simply vanish. There is hunger, cold, confusion. But still, they walk. By the time they reach Constantinople, the Byzantine emperor is overwhelmed. He had asked for mercenaries. What he got was something closer to a tidal wave. Still, the emperor allows them to pass. He supplies guides, ships, advice. But there is tension, misunderstandings. Even in alliance there is mistrust. And still they march on. Through Anatolia they face ambushes. They fight in unfamiliar terrain. Their armour is heavy, the sun is punishing. They struggle to find food, to locate water. But they keep moving. And in 1097 they begin to win. They take Nicaea. They push through Dorylaeum. They capture Antioch, barely, after a long and bitter siege. And after months of near starvation, disease and infighting, they stand victorious. But Jerusalem lies further south, and the journey is not yet done. As they approach the Holy City in the spring of 1099, their numbers are smaller. Many have died, many have deserted. What remains is a hardened core, a mixture of nobles and commoners, veterans and zealots. They carry swords, banners, and the burden of their vows. When they see the walls of Jerusalem for the first time, it is not with joy. It is with awe, with dread. The city sits high, crowned in stone. Its gates are sealed. Its defenders are prepared. The Crusaders have no siege engines, no ladders, little food, almost no water. But still, they begin. They encamp on the hills surrounding the city. The summer sun beats down. Thirst becomes unbearable. Some drink from fetid pools. Some collapse. The walls seem impenetrable. The defenders shout down insults. Arrows fly. The Crusaders begin building. Wood is scavenged from nearby forests, ladders, towers, battering rams, all under constant threat from the walls above. The siege of Jerusalem has begun, and every man on either side of those walls knows this will not end quickly, nor peacefully. Among the Crusaders, names begin to rise. Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto. Each a lord in his own right, each with different motives. Some seek land, others seek glory, and some, it seems, truly believe they are walking in the path of God. But belief alone is not enough. The journey from Western Europe to Jerusalem is long, and the crusade, though often romanticised, is not clean. There are divisions, disputes over leadership, arguments about tactics. Bohemond keeps Antioch for himself. Some call him traitor, others call him practical. There are also darker stains. Along the way, some groups massacre Jewish communities in the Rhineland, pogroms wrapped in religious zealotry. Violence done in the name of the cross, not part of any strategy, only hate. But the crusade continues, reshaped with each mile. By the time they reach the outskirts of Jerusalem, It is no longer a pilgrimage. It is a campaign of survival, and the city itself, Jerusalem, is more than just a dot on a map. For Christians, it is the place of Christ's death and resurrection. For Muslims, it is the site of the Prophet's night journey. For Jews, it is the ancient city of David, of the Temple. 3 faiths, 1 city. Inside its walls in 1099 is a population of mixed peoples, Arabs, Jews, Orthodox Christians, ruled by the Fatimid Caliphate, a Shia Muslim dynasty that had retaken Jerusalem from the Sunni Seljuks not long before. The city is fortified, its gates strong, its defenders prepared, but so are the Crusaders, though not in the way you might imagine. Their armour is dented, their boots are worn through. Many have wrapped their feet in rags, some carry rusted weapons or splintered shields, and their numbers have shrunk. Perhaps as few as 12,000 remain. Still, they begin to circle the city. It is early June. The sun is relentless. The hills are dry. The streams trickle slowly, if at all. The Crusaders try to surround the city, but they do not have the men. They settle into camps, dig ditches. They pray, they sing, they bicker, and slowly they begin to prepare. Timber is scarce. Scouts are sent miles away to gather wood. Wagons return carrying chopped logs. These are fashioned into siege towers, ladders and rams. But building takes time, and the defenders fire upon them constantly, arrows, stones and Greek fire. Inside the city, the defenders hold fast. They reinforce the gates, patrol the walls. They know the terrain. They control the water, and they wait. Among the Crusaders, morale falters. Water grows dangerously low. Men dig for hidden wells. They drink from animal troughs, from shallow pits filled with stagnant rainwater. Disease spreads, sores open, rations dwindle, and yet they stay. On July 8th, the Crusaders do something unexpected. Barefoot, they march in a circle around the city, retracing what they believe to be the steps of Joshua at Jericho. They chant psalms, they carry relics. This is not strategy. It is symbolism, a final appeal to heaven. For many, this is no longer war. It is prophecy. The towers are nearly complete now. Crude, but tall enough. They will be rolled into place, and then the real assault will begin. But whether it will succeed, no one knows. Not yet. Not from beneath that hot, blinding sun. Not from behind those high, ancient walls. The siege, in truth, has only just begun. Now, step inside the walls of Jerusalem. Imagine yourself there, not as a crusader, but as someone who lives in the city, a merchant, a servant, a widow, perhaps a baker or a scribe. Whatever your role, you're now a defender, willing or not. You know they're out there. You hear the hammering, the shouting, the groaning creak of siege towers being raised in the dry, dusty heat. The walls of Jerusalem are thick, but so are the rumours, and they move fast. They say the Franks are starving, they say they're dying, they say they will break soon, but they do not break, and so you keep your place, on the wall if you're fit, in prayer if you're not. Inside the city the tension builds, supplies are limited, fresh food is already gone, the price of bread triples, then doubles again, meat is rare. The markets, once full of colour and shouting, have gone quiet. Instead of sellers, there are soldiers. Instead of carts with fruit and cloth, there are guards watching every gate, every well, every corner. The city becomes smaller with each passing day. People speak in whispers. They keep their doors closed. At night, you hear distant cries. Someone has collapsed in the street. Someone else is digging a shallow hole in a courtyard. You keep your head down. There is prayer, always prayer, in the mosques, in the churches, at private shrines. The air is thick with incense and dust. You light a candle. You press your hands together. You ask for mercy or a miracle. And still they build. Their towers rise slowly, but they rise. Day by day, pulled by ropes and pushed by aching limbs, they inch toward the wall. You've seen them now, tall, boxy frames of timber, wrapped in hides, bristling with shields and planks. Ladders rest against them. Arrows already protrude from their flanks. Then, one morning, everything changes. The bell is struck, not from your tower, but from theirs. The assault has begun. They come at nightfall, and again at dawn. Waves of them, yelling, climbing, falling. You throw stones, boil oil. You push ladders back with poles. You tip beams from the parapets. But they keep coming. One tower breaks apart under fire. Another makes it to the wall. For a moment it seems contained. Then you hear it. The southern gate breached. The wall broken. They're inside. Panic spreads faster than arrows. The guards retreat. The citizens flee. Some rush to the rooftops, others to the holy sites, the mosques, the churches, anywhere that might be spared. But there is no refuge. What follows is chaos. In the narrow streets there is shouting, screaming, the clash of steel on stone. Shops are looted, homes are broken into. You run or you hide. The Crusaders do not distinguish. To them the city is a symbol, to be taken, to be claimed. They call it a victory. But for those inside the walls, it is an ending. 3 days of slaughter follow, 3 days of fire and fear. The chronicles say the streets ran red, but you don't see that. You only see your feet, your hands, the shaking door in front of you, and the hope that someone walks past instead of breaking it down. By the end, the city is quiet again. Smoke rises from courtyards. Crows gather on the rooftops. The bells have stopped, and a new banner flies from the Tower of David. The First Crusade is over. Jerusalem has fallen. But for those who lived through the siege, on either side of the wall, it is not glory that remains. Only exhaustion, only silence, and the long, slow reckoning of what came next. Let's shift our focus now, away from the roar of the crowd, away from the clatter of shields and the thunder of siege towers. Let the dust settle. Let the fires burn down to embers, and look, instead, at what lies beneath. Because beneath every great siege, beneath the walls, beneath the weapons, even beneath the marching armies, was a layer of quiet ingenuity, of strange devices, lost techniques, and curious strategies designed not to inspire awe, but to outlast the enemy, to rot them from within, to undermine them, literally. These were the forgotten tricks of siege warfare. Let's begin with the ground itself. You see, when an army could not go over the walls, they went under. Tunnels, dug by hand, slowly, quietly. Not with machines, but with pickaxes, shovels and baskets for soil. These were called mines. Not the explosive kind, but tunnels designed to collapse the foundations of a wall or tower. Once beneath the desired point, sappers would pack the space with flammable material. Pitch, dry wood, animal fat. Then they would light it, and wait. The fire would weaken the earth. The supports would fail, and the wall above, so solid, so proud, would tremble and fall. Defenders, of course, learned to listen. They would press their ears to the stone floors of the towers, feeling for vibrations. They placed bowls of water on flat stones, watching for ripples. If they suspected a mine, they dug counter-tunnels to intercept and collapse them. These underground duels were slow, dark, claustrophobic, and often deadly. Sometimes the fighting happened face-to-face in cramped tunnels, lit only by torchlight, with blades barely able to swing. And then there were the things that didn't involve stone or steel, but rot. It's easy to forget that disease was a weapon long before gunpowder. When a siege dragged on and armies ran low on ammunition, they turned to the natural world. Dead animals, carrion, corpses, launched by catapult, flung over the walls. They weren't meant to kill on impact. They were meant to fester, to poison the water supply, to bring disease. Imagine waking up to the sight of a bloated cow carcass splattering in the courtyard, or a wrapped body landing near the well, and not just the smell, but the fear, the uncertainty. Was it plague? Was it cursed? Defenders had to move quickly, burn the bodies, clean the water. But the doubt lingered, and when a cough began to spread among the garrison, no one knew if it was the cold or the beginning of something far worse. Other tactics were just as strange. Siege engines, towers, rams, ballistae were not always practical. They took time, resources, space. So sometimes a more subtle approach was used. One such trick, the use of sound. Soldiers would pound drums, shout battle cries, or create the illusion of a larger force to unnerve the defenders. Torches would be spread out across the hills to suggest reinforcements had arrived. Campfires lit in deliberate patterns, meant to mimic the glow of massive armies just out of sight. Psychological warfare long before the term existed. Some attackers went further, dressing in the armour of fallen enemies, faking surrenders, sending false messages over the wall, claiming the city's allies had betrayed them or that help was not coming. The siege was not only fought with steel, it was fought with fear, with patience, with imagination, and over time, many of these tricks vanished, lost in dusty scrolls, buried under ruins, mentioned only in the margins of chronicles barely remembered. But the next time you see an old stone wall or the remnants of a ruined fortress, remember what may have once moved beneath it. A tunnel, a trick, a war fought in shadows. Let's return underground, to the miners, the sappers. In places like the siege of Rochester Castle in 1215, King John's men tunnelled beneath the tower foundations. They didn't just dig, they used pigs, not for food, but for fat. Historical records say that once the mine was dug beneath the great stone tower, the attackers stuffed it with 40 pigs, dead ones. Why pigs? Because fat burns hot. They lit the animals alight and the fire weakened the supports. The tower above groaned, shifted, and collapsed. Imagine the silence before the fall, the muffled crack of ancient stone, the quiet tension as soldiers watched the ground beneath them betray its shape, and then the sudden chaos as centuries of masonry gave way in an instant. But not all mines were successful. Sometimes they collapsed too early. Sometimes defenders flooded them with water or filled them with smoke. In a few rare cases, they even dropped barrels of bees or hornets into enemy tunnels. Nature turned into a weapon. Above ground, other strange engines of war emerged. The trebuchet is often remembered as the king of siege weapons, but not all trebuchets were created equal. Some, like the counterweight trebuchet, could launch projectiles with terrifying force. Entire stones the size of barrels, hurtling through the air like comets. But they weren't always used to knock down walls. Sometimes they launched messages, bundles of straw with notes tied to them, demands for surrender, warnings, or lies, designed to frighten the defenders into surrendering early. The psychology of the siege was just as important as its mechanics. Other forgotten machines dot the margins of medieval records, like the espringale, a massive torsion-powered crossbow capable of firing bolts nearly the length of a man, or the mantlet, a wheeled wooden shield used to slowly approach a wall while under arrow fire. There were battering rams sheathed in iron, siege towers covered in wet hides to prevent fire, rolling carts with grappling hooks, designed to catch the edge of a wall and tear it down stone by stone. But perhaps the most unusual were the fire jars. Clay pots filled with pitch, resin, and sometimes even oil or quicklime. They were lit and hurled by catapult or thrown by hand. Upon breaking, they burst into flame, sticking to surfaces, clinging to clothes. The defenders had their own tricks. They dropped quicklime from the walls, powdered limestone that, when it hit moist skin or eyes, caused intense pain. They would aim it at attackers trying to climb ladders, not to kill them, just to stop them from climbing. Defenders also crafted false walls, thin wooden structures covered with plaster and paint, mimicking solid stone. These would be placed in front of actual breaches to confuse and delay attackers. By the time they realised the wall was fake, they were funneled into kill zones. Even boiling water, often imagined in stories, was a real tactic. Not always oil, which was expensive, but water or sand heated until red hot, then poured through murder holes to scald the flesh of those below. There was also noise. During the siege of Constantinople in 717, Defenders rang bells, beat drums, and cried out at all hours, not just to communicate, but to keep their enemies from resting. An early form of psychological exhaustion. You might think of it as a medieval version of sleep deprivation. And then there were animals. Some warlords tried using flaming pigs to disrupt war elephants. Others strapped torches to birds, hoping they'd fly into thatched roofs and set enemy towns ablaze. Did these tactics work? Not always. But in siege warfare, even failure had value, if it bought time, sowed confusion, or weakened morale. Because in truth, a siege was not about a single moment of victory. It was about pressure, weeks of pressure, months, even years of mental, physical and spiritual exhaustion. The walls were only half the battle. The rest was waged in tunnels, in tricks, in terrors whispered through the ranks. Most of these methods are forgotten now, mentioned only in footnotes, sketches in margins, ruins buried beneath layers of stone. But every time you walk past an old gatehouse, every time you see a crumbled tower, remember, what you see above was once only half the story. There was always something more, just beneath your feet. Let's move now, from the mind of the attacker to the mind of the defender. When the enemy built towers, you built traps. When they dug tunnels, you dug deeper. When they tried to scale your walls, you made the walls lie. Because in siege warfare, defence wasn't passive. It was creative. It was strategic. It was at times beautifully brutal. Take, for instance, the murder hole. The name is grim. The design is elegant. From the outside, it looked like a narrow slit in the ceiling of a gatehouse. But from above, it was opportunity. A soldier positioned there could look straight down at intruders trying to force the main gate. He could drop stones, or pour water, or boiling oil, though that was rare. More often, it was sand, heated in iron pans until glowing red, then poured in slow streams. It didn't take much to disable a man wearing metal. Chainmail trapped heat. A single cup of hot sand could turn armour into an oven. Gatehouses were designed with these small, cruel advantages in mind. Narrow corridors forced attackers into tight spaces where they could be picked off from above. Arrow slits allowed defenders to fire without exposing themselves. Staggered stairways were built to the left so that a right-handed attacker couldn't swing his sword easily as he ascended. And walls. Walls were more than just stone. They were stories. The first layer was meant to slow, the second to confuse, the third to kill. Some castles used false entries. You'd think you'd reach the inner keep, only to find yourself in a dead-end courtyard, surrounded on all sides by archer towers. The panic set in quickly, and panic did the work of 100 arrows. Sometimes defenders crafted crenellations, those iconic battlements that crown medieval walls. The notches allowed archers to hide behind cover, fire, then duck back behind stone. But some had removable panels, wooden shutters, or even weighted cloth to confuse spotters and protect against fire arrows. The walls themselves could be deceptive. In a few fortresses, outer walls were built with sloped bases, called battered walls, designed to deflect boulders launched by siege engines. Some used river stones, packed tightly, which absorbed shocks better than brick or raw limestone. And when stone wasn't enough, fire was used. Cauldrons of pitch or resin were kept near the gates. When attackers clustered with ladders, the defenders would tip the mixture down, then ignite it. The flame wasn't just hot. It clung, like tar. It was smoke and heat and confusion all at once. But perhaps the most quietly clever defence was simply silence. Many fortresses practiced deception through quiet. If attackers were approaching, torches might be extinguished. Archers would wait in complete stillness, letting the enemy draw close, and then, without warning, unleash a coordinated volley. It wasn't just about strength, it was about timing, precision. In some cities, wells were constructed inside walls, hidden and guarded, so that, even if all other sources were poisoned or blocked, water remained. During sieges that lasted months, gardens were grown inside the courtyards, small plots of herbs and root vegetables, cultivated in barrels or stone-lined boxes, not to feed everyone, but to send a message. We can wait longer than you. And when the siege did not go well, defenders used the final tool available, illusion. Walls were repainted, cracks patched with plaster to look whole. False windows were added to towers to suggest more archers. Torches were moved to different positions each night to suggest rotation, movement, readiness. Even voices were weaponized. During the siege of Chateau Gaillard in 1203, the defenders were so few they shouted from different towers, moving constantly to sound like a full garrison. For days the illusion held, until it didn't. But illusions bought time, and in a siege, time could mean everything. The most effective defence was not impenetrability, it was unpredictability. Not the strength of the wall, but the uncertainty behind it. Would the gate burst open and release cavalry? Would the tower collapse under a fire trap? Would the water be poisoned, or the food be a lie? These questions haunted the besiegers, and it was in that uncertainty that defenders found their greatest ally. Even now, when we walk the ruins of castles and city walls, we rarely see these tricks. The fake doors, the narrow stairs, the hidden wells. But they're there, if you look closely. If you imagine the fear and the cunning and the quiet hands that built them. They're still there, in stone, in shadow, waiting for a siege that may never come again. Now imagine for a moment that the burden rests on your shoulders. You're not a commoner huddled in the chapel. You're not a soldier on the ramparts. You are the lord of this castle, and the siege is yours to endure, yours to resist, and yours to survive, or to fail with. You sleep when you can in the great hall. At night the fire burns low in the hearth, crackling softly, the only sound besides the wind echoing through the narrow windows. The high stone walls around you are familiar, ornate, once impressive, now draughty and cold. Once this hall hosted feasts, trestle tables laid with meats, cheeses and pies, minstrels playing lutes, hounds dozing near the fire. Now it is quiet. The tapestries hang limp. The wine is watered. And you eat. Carefully. You still have food. A little more than the rest. Not out of greed, but necessity. If the garrison sees you starving, hope flickers. If the court sees you frail, discipline falters. So your plate has slightly more than theirs. A slice of dried venison, a wedge of hard cheese, a bit of preserved fruit. You chew slowly, and you pretend to enjoy it. Your days are filled with decisions. At dawn you meet with the steward to review supplies. Barrels of grain, sacks of beans, rows of dwindling candles. The cellar still holds wine, but the good casks are gone. You consider watering it further, but morale is thin enough already. Later you meet with the master of arms. He brings reports. How many arrows remain? How many injured men can still fight? What repairs have been made to the south tower? You nod. You ask questions. You do not show fear. But in truth you are tired. Not from hunger, though that creeps in slowly. Not from sleep, though yours is broken and brief. But from the weight of silence. You cannot confide in your nights. You cannot admit uncertainty to the steward. You cannot let the servants see the lines deepening around your eyes. So you pace the hall, you walk the perimeter, you reread old letters, and you wait. Punishments still fall under your command. Yesterday a man was caught hoarding onions. Another was found spreading rumours of surrender. You chose to imprison one and whip the other. Neither decision felt good. But indecision would have been worse. You've learned that order does not come from strength. It comes from consistency. Even now, perhaps especially now, justice must be seen to be done. At night your advisors whisper possibilities. A breakout, a plea for terms, a last message sent by hawk or rider. But you've weighed each one already. The messenger could be caught. The gates once opened might not close again. There are no good options, only slightly less terrible ones. So you stay. You review the lists again. How many mouths, how many weapons, how many days? You light a candle, not because you need light, but because it helps to see something burn slowly, and outside in the dark. You imagine them watching you, thousands of them, in tents, by their own fires, waiting. Leadership under siege is not about glory. It's about holding together a system that wants to fall apart, about keeping fear just contained enough that it doesn't become chaos, about walking a thin line between calm and collapse, and pretending you don't see it. In normal times, your authority was secured by land, law, and reputation. Now it is held together by ritual, by visibility, by silence. Each day you walk the same route, down the great hall, through the courtyard, along the battlements. You nod to the men, ask small questions, compliment their vigilance. You do not rush, you do not show fatigue, because the moment they see you falter, it begins to spread. You know what's at stake. You've read about it in chronicles, in letters, in church records. Sieges end in different ways, sometimes with terms, sometimes with breach, sometimes from within. Betrayal is as old as castles, so you watch your inner circle closely. The steward has been loyal for years, but you've noticed his eyes drift toward the cellar log more often than usual. The captain of the guard is growing restless. He still trains the men daily, but his voice has taken on an edge, and your cousin, the one who arrived just before the siege began, has grown quiet in council. Too quiet. You take mental notes. You keep them to yourself. Loyalty, after all, does not always survive hunger. You hold evening councils by candlelight, not to make new decisions, you've already made them, but to keep the structure intact, to make sure everyone still feels heard. The priest sits to your left. He speaks less now. His sermons are shorter, but he still lights incense each morning in the chapel, and that too holds meaning. There is comfort in repetition, even if it no longer changes anything. Your servants bring you water, just a cup. You drink slowly, leave a little in the bottom. The gesture is noted. At meals, you sit alone, not at the head of the table, but near the fire. The old seat, the one carved with lions, remains empty. You left it that way for the men to see. A quiet symbol. We are not feasting here. The great hall feels larger now, colder. Each night the fire seems to fight harder to warm the space. You wrap your cloak tighter, but it's not the cold that seeps in, it's the doubt. What if relief doesn't come? What if your allies have abandoned you? What if surrender is the merciful choice? You push the thoughts aside, because once you allow that idea to take root, it will spread. Through your advisors, your men, your walls. You turn your focus to practical things. Inventory, water usage, rotation of watch shifts. You have read the old siege manuals, those dusty tomes that advise noblemen on how to withstand a blockade. They don't tell you what to do when your page boy begins to cry in his sleep, or when the lady of the castle quietly asks you if she should begin fasting, for the sake of the children. You nod gently and say nothing. Leadership is not about having the right words, it is about holding the silence, without breaking. In your private chamber you allow yourself a single indulgence, an old letter, faded, creased, from your mother, or your son, or someone now gone. You read it slowly, not for the words, but for the handwriting, for the memory of a time when decisions were small, and walls meant safety, not isolation. You fold it again, place it back beneath the cot, and then you rise, because morning will come, and with it, another list of decisions, another day of measured strength, another performance of certainty. You are the lord of the castle, and for now, the walls still stand. While you walk the halls and oversee the defence, your family waits in the tower. Not the tallest one. That would draw attention. Not the gatehouse, either. Too exposed. They're tucked away in the eastern wing, just behind the chapel, a little higher than the courtyard, but far enough from the outer wall to avoid stray arrows. It was once the Lady's Solar, a place of warmth and privacy, where tapestries caught the morning sun and voices drifted up from the kitchens below, a room of needlework, of quiet conversation, of singing. Now it is a bunker. The windows are shuttered, the curtains are drawn. The light comes only from a single oil lamp flickering in a shallow dish. Your wife, or perhaps your mother, your sister, your eldest daughter, sits with her back to the stone wall, eyes fixed on the floor. She does not ask questions anymore. Not about the grain, not about the noise outside, not even about the rumours. She simply waits. The children, if there are children, no longer cry when the bell rings. They've grown used to it. They play in silence. Their toys are different now. A bit of carved bone, a discarded chess piece, a doll wrapped in an old banner. They know to whisper, to sit still when footsteps pass beneath the tower, to cover their ears when the catapults strike the outer wall. You visit them each evening when your duties allow. The guard nods silently as you enter. You bring news, not truth, but enough of it to keep the illusion of hope. Supplies are holding. No breaches today. Help is coming soon. They nod. They say they believe you. They offer soft smiles, but they know. The room holds a stillness now, a suspended kind of time. Days pass not by clocks but by small changes. One child grows pale, another coughs. The nursemaid says little. The scent of lavender sachets no longer musks the air. Letters arrive less frequently now. The last messenger sent out to reach your allies left 10 days ago. He was fast, loyal, but 10 days is long. Too long. You pace in your chamber, reading and rereading the last dispatch. A promise of reinforcements. A vague mention of movement. They're coming. Maybe. You think about lighting a signal fire, but the wind is wrong, the clouds are low, and the wood is needed elsewhere, so you wait. Each night, before you return to your own quarters, you climb the narrow stairway up the tower, alone. At the top is a small platform, exposed, cold, but it offers a view. You scan the horizon. Tents, torches, shadows, always the same. No banners on the horizon, no friend, no rescue. You close your eyes, say a prayer. Not for victory, but for time. For one more day where the walls don't crack, where the bread holds out, where the people still follow your voice. Down below in the hallways you've begun to hear whispers of surrender. Not yet demands, just suggestions. The kind that grow roots if you let them sit too long. So you write. A note to your cousin, commanding the borderlands, another to the bishop, pleading for spiritual intercession, and a third, left blank, for the terms you may one day have to send to the enemy camp. You place that one at the bottom of the stack, face down, and in the quiet hours before dawn you sit beside your family in the tower, not to talk, not to plan, just to share the silence, to be something human in a world slowly turning stone. Because no matter what comes next, they are watching you. And you must remain the wall, even if everything else begins to fall. And now, the siege is over. The gate, once sealed with iron and fire, has been opened, one way or another. Perhaps the enemy broke through. Perhaps your allies arrived, too late to matter. Or perhaps the decision came from within, quiet, grim, and necessary. However it ended, it ended. The torches in the outer camps are gone. The shouting has faded. The clamour of towers being pulled across dry earth is now only memory. What remains are the walls. Some are cracked, some still stand. Others lie in ruin, stone by stone, open to the sky. Inside, the fortress is quiet again. The courtyard is scattered with broken carts, abandoned boots, bits of torn cloth. There's no rush to clean them, no energy left. The survivors move slowly, if at all. A few sit in doorways, staring out at nothing. A dog barks somewhere in the lower bailey, its voice startling in the silence. The bread is gone. The barrels are empty. But for now, there is no hunger, only fatigue. A stillness has settled over everything. A heavy kind of peace, where even the birds are hesitant to sing. You, whether peasant, soldier or lord, step outside. The air smells different. Less like smoke, more like ash. Less like fear, more like distance. The siege is no longer something happening. It is something that happened, a memory already softening at the edges. You may rebuild, or you may leave. You may be remembered, or simply recorded in a dusty ledger no one reads. But one truth remains. You endured it. You held the line, or bore the waiting, or carried the weight. And now, you rest. Tonight your walls are gone. There are no ramparts to man, no torches to light, no ration lines, no alarms. Just the sound of wind through empty towers. Just the ache of muscles that no longer need to hold the world in place. You're safe now. The danger is past. Close your eyes. Let the stones grow cold behind you. Let the gates close gently. Not in fear this time, but in quiet and sleep. Because this siege is over.